everyone, welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith. This is going to be a Kickstarter preview for Unbroken. Now, there's been a bunch of buzz on this game already, and I want to just add to the pile because this is a solo playable game only. So that's the reason why this piqued my interest, and this is one of the reasons why I want to bring this forward to you guys to show you kind of how it's played and what it's all about. Now this, again, like any of my Kickstarter previews, is total prototype. So everything you're seeing here, including the box itself, any of the cards and stuff like this, will all change based on the success of the Kickstarter. Now that Kickstarter is set to launch for March 27 of 2018, of course, this year, so that's not that far away. If you're happening to watch this video right now, either the Kickstarter has already launched or you're kind of getting a little lucky and you found this video prior to the Kickstarter launching and you'll have already used this as ammo towards whether you'd like to back the game. So that's really the purpose of this video, is to show you guys how this game is played, what it's all about. We're going to do one playthrough of it, which will show you one aspect of it, but I'm sure based on the insane amount of combinations here just in the prototype of how things can potentially be built, there's a wide variety of different ways this could pan out. So I've already done the setup that you can see here in front of you. I'm going to go through this and talk about it in a few seconds, but first I just want to make mention of a little bit of the backstory of the game, and then we'll talk a little bit about the setup, what you're seeing here, so we have a general understanding of some of the icons so nobody gets confused. We'll get right up close and personal with stuff so that you're not seeing anything from too far away, and then we'll move through it. So first off is the backstory for Unbroken. So Unbroken is, the backstory starts off with: venturing into this darkness was folly, and you knew it. You went anyway, the promises of riches and glory seducing you and your companions. A hardened band of adventurers, or so you thought. The collapsed tunnel left you trapped. The monsters were ready and waiting. It was not a battle, it was a massacre, and you were wounded severely enough that your assailants didn't bother with a killing blow. They murdered your friends and took your possessions, but they didn't kill you. Big mistake. Teeth clenched, you patch up your wounds as best you can. A desire for revenge is smoldering inside of you. There will be a price for the blood they spilled. You have nothing left to lose as you struggle to free yourself from this cursed place. You stand up wounded, lost, desperate. Your spirit, however, is unbroken. In terms of an overview, Unbroken is a solo card game of survival and revenge. You play as an unfortunate adventurer who is left for dead in a monster-infested cavern. Your goal is to collect enough resources to defeat 4 progressively more difficult monsters on your way to freedom and vengeance. If you're able to succeed, or if you are to succeed, you will need to gather every bit of your resolve and be smart with the resources found in these catacombs. The game is played over the course of 4 levels. In each level, you begin with the travel phase, in which you collect resources, prepare yourself for the coming battle. Then you encounter the monsters in the combat phase. Should you survive the battle, you progress to the next level. If you defeat the monster at level 4, you are victorious. So as you can see down here, the player boards, we have a number of different ones set up. Of course, we have the character we've chosen, and there's a number of them inside the game. At the end of this video, I'll do a quick run through of the different other combinations that could have come out through the game. This includes what different monsters could have come out of each level, because again, as you know from the description I just read, 4 different levels of progression, which means 4 randomly added monsters in. We don't know what's coming just yet, but we do know there's a bunch of heroes we can choose from. Of course, Kickstarter may enhance all of this on top of what's already in the prototype, but I'll be sure to show you what's at least in the prototype from the get-go at the end of this video if you're interested. But for now, we've chosen the Brawler, so that's who we're going to go with. We're going to go with all about melee fighting, and we're going to talk a little bit about the actual resource tracker and the reference sheets here, and some of the actual icons that you're going to see. So one of the major resource types, which you can find on the resource tracker here, is going to be the effort tracker. So this is really, really important. So the effort is an important resource overall. And basically it's a measure of your life force, your stamina and determination. So it's going to be used to pay for most of your actions, and most importantly to inflict wounds on monsters. There are 3 categories of effort: small, medium, and large, and each of them have distinct icons to show you which one's which. So you can obviously see that you've kind of got the lower of the 2 in terms of small amount of effort right here, which is where we start off with 13 small amount of effort. We also have a medium effort as well as large effort, and you'll see why they're broken up like this as we go through the gameplay. But for now, I just want to make sure we understand what each of these icons mean. Next up, we'll move into some of the other things above here, which will talk a little bit more about some more resources that are also important for different reasons. So at the very top here, there is kind of a fox-looking character there, and that one is called Cunning. So this particular resource is not all problems are solved with brute force. Some obstacles are going to require a smarter, craftier approach, so having your cunning is a representation of how inventive and sneaky you can be. Cunning is a resource that you use to learn more about your foes and to trick them without fighting. So this is something you may want to bump up if you want to try to maybe sneak past a monster instead of confronting it. Again, maybe hinges on what type of character you want to be or what character you've chosen. So that's something you can look at in terms of something to be progressed. Another resource is food. So revenge is hungry work, and of course, effort you spend will tax your body. So at the end of every level, you will need to eat something. Not being able to do so is going to start sapping you of much needed strength, and you could even die of starvation. So again, having food on you is really, really important. And the food icon is actually not underneath this fox one here. It's the fourth one down. That is the icon for food. Next up is the wood and metal. So that's going to be right here, metal and wood. Those are the next two. So you will not last long fighting with your bare hands. Now at the very beginning of the game, we start with the bare hands card, which basically allows us to fight with our bare hands. So we're going to be able to expend certain amounts of effort from the effort tracker to inflict certain amounts of damage against the monsters, but that's only going to be really useful in the first level. Once we start progressing further into it, we're not going to be able to focus our full attacks on bare hands, or we're going to be in real big trouble. So you're going to want to try to pick up scraps of metal and wood and start combining them to be able to craft better weapons. So this is going to require those types of materials, wood and metal. So you're going to skills you acquire along the way. It might also help you find new or often violent uses for these two resources. And you can see their skill cards up here. So those are kind of tied in a little bit. Next up is treasure. So that's the last icon here in the row. So treasure, of course, the purpose of your original expedition is treasure. That was the reason you came into these caverns in the first place. So treasure is important. You will seldom find it useful down in the depths, but if you emerge alive, treasure yields the most points in calculating how impressive your unlikely victory was. So it's going to go for essentially end-game points. It's going to boost how much of a score you get at the end, so it's never a bad thing. Treasure is always good. The other one that's really, really big is on the other sheet here, and it's called the time tracker. So that icon is simply just for time. On each level, you only have so much time to spend preparing and exploring before the monster becomes aware of you and attacks you. Each encounter carries a time cost, so some actions do as well. So doing an action can cost time, bringing you closer to the inevitable combat. So basically, when you start a round, you can see here that we've denoted that we're on level number 1, and you can see the monster that we know is in this dungeon, but we don't know what it is yet, is already been randomly assorted into this pile of 4 different cards. Each card here goes in order, so we have the first level, the second level goes all the way down to 4, and it's saying the game to start our time tracker on 1, so we have only essentially the ability to spend 7 positions worth of time before the monster attacks us. There's a strategy there in terms of whether we want to expend all of the time or to actually kind of get the jump on the monster, or have the monster have the jump on us. We'll talk more about that when we get to the gameplay. So the general idea of both of these sheets is really you're just tracking your resources throughout the game. So you're going to be tracking your current supply of them. You're going to be adjusting the tokens on the sheets in your display, increasing them when you gain one, decreasing when you spend or lose it. There is a separate resource bar for each type, which we talked about many of them here. You can never have more than any resource that's corresponding bar has space for. So of course you can't go off the bar and allow for more than what's actually available in the actual game. And if you would gain more, then the excess is just lost. But that essentially wraps up the idea of these. We're going to talk about this monster tracker section a little bit later on. So next up is the character sheet. So of course we talked about the fact we are going to be playing the brawler, so they're going to contain information about abilities specific to the character you're playing. Only one character card will be in play for any given game. So you're going to see that I have a bunch of powers, or abilities I should say, that basically allow us to do different things. Most of them, it seems to be in the melee capacity. We'll talk more about why that wooden cube is up in the single 1 or level 1 position later on, but this is your character sheet. We also have what's known as weapon sheet. So weapon sheets would technically start out with your bare hands, and that can be considered a weapon sheet. They allow you to spend effort to break armor and inflict wounds. You can see here that if I look at these particular different types of exertion, if I exert small amounts of effort, like 2 of them, I can put 1 wound. So essentially if I exert 2, I could drop this cube to 11, and that would allow me to exert 1 health worth of damage towards a monster. But if I start getting up into the heavier amounts of damage, or heavy amounts of effort, I should say, then if I go to medium, for instance, like I use 2 of those icons, if I happen to have any medium, I could inflict 3. So there's a little bit, the effort is tied into how much energy you're expending to fight. Of course, you're also capped by what actual weapon you have in hand. In this case, bare arms or bare hands is all we have. So that's basically covering up the weapon sheets. The other really cool thing about the game is it comes with, at least the prototype does, the Kickstarter will probably increase on this, but a whole stack of different things. Now what's really interesting about this is these are all the different weapons that you can kind of acquire. These are in the prototype, so again there could be a lot more at the end of the Kickstarter, but what you'll really notice about this stuff is you'll see at the very bottom here that once you start gaining resources, some of the things we talked about earlier, like wood and metal and things like that, and effort, you can actually start merging these components together and crafting to upgrade your weapons. Once I upgrade, I can choose a path. I can upgrade knife, I can upgrade a club. If I choose whichever one I choose, I then replace the bare hands with that one. So if I went ahead and crafted a knife, this would then take the spot of different things that I could potentially exert effort on to inflict damage. You can see my worst or my best case scenario would be 5 health, which is much better than 3. So again, progression there with the weapon sheets. Monster sheets are totally different. I'm not going to show you a monster sheet until we actually run into it, until we actually resolve or flip over or scout out and find one. But there are those sheets over there in the top left hand corner. For now, I've randomly selected one from every different level and put them there, so I don't know what's there. So we're going to find out more about those when the gameplay kind of commences. Encounter cards right here, this deck, they're basically going to represent encounters that you have to go through during your travels. They're also going to offer opportunities to obtain or exchange resources, so they're good for that reason. Again, it's probably better to see them in action versus talking about them individually. Skill cards, which are these ones right here, they're usually obtained after victories in combat and offer additional abilities to help you on your quest. There's no limit on how many skill cards you can have, so these are really going to beef up the amount of things that my character can do. So getting skills is a good thing. Condition cards, obviously a bad thing, and the conditions always stay face up because they're just known. There's only one of each of them, but they all basically going to do bad things to your character. Certain monsters are going to inflict certain conditions to your character you're going to have to deal with. In this case, this says paralyzed. There might be ones that, you could see one that says paranoid or something like that. There's a bunch of different ones, and we'll resolve them as we run into them. So that essentially covers the card types in Unbroken. So let's come back over here and actually revisit this particular tracker area. Remember when I was talking about the monster tracker, and I said we would talk about this later? Well, later is now. So we're going to talk a little bit about these 2 icons, the only ones I didn't resolve from earlier. This is armor and this is health. So let's go through them one at a time. So armor's at the very top here. Certain monsters are going to be well protected. You're going to have to break their armor before you can inflict any wounds. So some weapons are more efficient than others at breaking that armor. Certain skills allow you to bypass the armor. So this is just again a track to say if you happen to have a monster with armor, you're going to track it there. And again, health, exact same mindset. They're going to have a certain health. You're trying to get it to 0 because you're trying to kill them. It's going to represent their endurance and their strength. So this is your way of representing and tracking the monster's health as well as armor. Let's go back and talk a little bit about the time tracker over here. So as you can see, we've got the time tracker set to 7. So we will be explaining a little bit more about how this actually works when we go through the playthrough, which is going to follow this right away. But I will let let you know that, of course, if time, while we're trying to prepare, happens to slip down to 0 because maybe we run the risk of trying to prepare for too long. So, for instance, we're, doing our thing, using actions, preparing, we get to 2, we get to 1, and we say, you know what, actually we get to 2, and we say, let's risk it and do something and see what an encounter turns out to be, and it ends up saying, it costs you 2 time and you can't do anything about it. You've run out of time, and at that point in time, the monster, which is over here, depending on which level you're at, in our case 1 to start, would ambush us, and that's really bad. It's a negative effect. You do not want the monster to ambush you. It gives them an advantage. You want to try to go after the monster when you're ready and prepared to do so, so you kind of want to stop short of hitting 0. That's kind of the idea. We'll talk a little bit more about that during the playthrough as to why that is and what the negative effects are. But I just want to make mention of the fact that that is something to be aware of. So we are just about to begin the playthrough. The last thing I want to make reference of is this general actions template here. Now this is going to be the main area we're going to be spending most of our time to basically convert specific resources into other resources in order to go after the things we want. So for instance, we can see here that if you choose to do as a general action to focus, you spend 4 small effort fists to gain 1 fiery medium effort fist, whereas you can actually convert 2 medium efforts into a strong, or essentially a strong, or you could do 4 of the smaller ones to create 1 cunning. You could use 1 small effort to reveal +2 cards during exploration, which basically when you choose to do exploration as an action, you're going to be able to grab an additional 2 cards, which is always nice. This one here is scouting, so this is basically a chart per level based on where you are. So as of right now, it would only cost us a small effort and some time to try to reveal a monster. The cool thing with the revealing of a monster in scouting, and it's usually something you want to do at the beginning of your playthrough, is to get an understanding of what kind of enemy is in the level that you have to deal with, so that you can use the rest of your time before it depletes in a wise manner to get ready for the fight. So that's kind of the interesting thing about this game. You don't have to. You can go in completely blind, but scouting really is helpful, but you'll see that that cost becomes a heck of a lot harder, and probably near level 3 and 4, you're going to be spending some serious resources to try to get a leg up by seeing what that monster is going to be in advance, whereas it's a little easier earlier on in the level tree. So essentially that's basically how that works. Moving on down here to crafting, of course, if you want to craft, so we talked about this earlier, if we want to craft a knife or a club based on resources that we have, we drop them down on the chart, and we can use a craft action and simply upgrade a weapon. So that basically sums up the whole thing. What we're going to do, of course, there's a lot more to it once we start playing it, so right now, how about we start doing that? So we're going to jump right into a playthrough for Unbroken. Again, this is going to be prototype material, so things, rules, everything else may change, so this may or may not be accurate as of the release of the actual production copy in the future, but hopefully this will help you in your decision to back the game. As a solo player, I'm really excited for this one, so hope you'll join me as we jump into Unbroken. And as always, keep on rolling solo.